Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Lewis Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
It's a pleasure to be here sharing with you for this time we have together.
And it's a pleasure, man. I'm glad that you're able to join us and with your extensive work, especially in education. I would just share just a short introduction of you, but I'll give you the opportunity to share with the listeners more about yourself before we get into the conversation. So Dr. Fletcher is the Executive Director of Facilities and Operations of El Paso County, Colorado School District. He also leads transportation, nutrition service, facility maintenance, security development, strategic planning, and capital construction. Dr. Fletcher, please share with the listeners more about yourself, because I know I haven't touched on some of the things that you have done, because I know you also is a professor, but I'll give you the opportunity to share with the listeners before we get into the questions themselves.
All right, well, thank you very much. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., in D.C.'s Anacostia neighborhood. It was a neighborhood that was more dangerous back then. I think now there's some gentrification that's come through the area. I was a 20-year retiree from the United States Air Force. I was retired as an Air Force officer. I worked in nuclear, I worked in space and nuclear operations. So I worked with the intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, also spacecraft and things like that. And I was able to get my PhD in education before I got off of active duty. And when I got off active duty, a lot of people wanted me to become a defense contractor, but my desire was to use a PhD in higher education. So at that time, at the end of my career, I started teaching for Webster University, and I've been a professor with Webster for about 15 years, and I teach space operations management topics for their master's degree program. So remote sensing, satellite communication, space commercialization, etc. But when I got out of the military, I started working for Troy University of Troy, Alabama. I was a regional director for them. And I had 6 locations in the Western United States, with my headquarters being in Colorado, and I had 4 locations overseas, 2 in Korea and 2 in Japan. So I had a lot of travel during that time. After I did that for about 4 years, I started to notice I wasn't at home as much, and I'm a family man, so I need to see my family and things like that. So I shifted gears. I worked for Webster as a campus director for about a year, but then I found a passion with the school district, because they were going through some issues where they had harassment and discrimination going on. And they previously had a relationship with the Department of Justice, and they couldn't get off of the contract then. So I was brought in to be able to look at that program and see how we get the district to a place where it could honor the contract with the Department of Justice, the DOJ. So I spent my first part of my time here working with lawyers from the DOJ, reforming programs, putting together employee training programs for them to be able to understand. Because one of the things I want to say is that teacher education and administrative education doesn't have a big component about diversity. A lot of it is about curriculum, which is understandable, but so far as teaching students who are diverse, it wasn't there. So I put that program in place for the staff. I also put something in place for the students to understand. I worked with Southern Poverty Law Center with the curriculum they put out for that, and I was able to get that turned around. So in about 3 years, I was able to request the DOJ lift oversight and monitoring, which I didn't know was a quick thing. Some districts have been on it for 20 years, and I finished it in 3. But that goes to prove when you don't know where the finish line is, sometimes you run faster than other people. So I ran through that, and then I stayed with the district as their director of culture and services, continuing to work to make sure that people understand equity and treating each other well, making sure that they don't have Title IX and Title VII and Title VI kind of violations. And then in the last 2 years, I became the executive director of facilities and operations. which kind of aligns with my military background. It's like being a commander of a large unit, like a wing or a group. So I have over 300 people, like I said, which transportation, getting the students to and from school, nutrition services, feeding those students while they're at school. My facilities guys make sure the schools don't fall down, make sure they are well maintained and the kids have a safe and clean place to be. And then I'm also into capital construction, where we look at the future of the school district and we look at what buildings, schools, and such administrative buildings need to be built to make sure that school district has sustainability and viability for the future to come.
And that is really impressive from your military background and your passion, your passion for service. Because as a military person, you are in service, and in the education system, you are in service. And you also mentioned your passion for a family that brought you back to where you are right now. Just listening to the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having, I will say it's impressive. And as a Black man, a lot of times they have put limitations on us. But just listening to the work that you have dedicated yourself to do, you have dismantled some of those stereotypes and limitations that they have placed on us. And again, man, thanks for being here. And I'm just going to jump into my first question, and hopefully
Okay.
I'll be able to touch on some of the things that you have already shared, and to get more information from you that I know the listeners will appreciate. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I think it takes a growth mindset to make a positive impact. I think that, and for the people who don't have a context for what a growth mindset is, you can have a mindset that's geared toward growth, or you can have a mindset that's geared toward being fixed, where your mindset is unchanging and that kind of thing, where you just see things being, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of mindset, versus if it's not broke, but we can make it better, let's go ahead and fix it and make it better. So I think a growth mindset is what's needed. For example, when you're looking at community issues or school issues and you see students not achieving, a fixed mindset would say, well, that's all they can do. So let's just see if we get them through at the level we get them through, and maybe we'll graduate some, maybe we won't. Or if they are achieving, but they're not achieving at high enough levels, you say, well, at least they're doing something if you have a fixed mindset. A growth mindset says, although the students are achieving, they could be doing better. And you look at things to be able to raise that level of achievement, because that today's achievement might work for today's job, but those kids are going to live in tomorrow's world. So you want to make sure that you're commensurate with the raising that achievement, raising that bar, to make sure those students are getting stronger and stronger and stronger as they go out into the world. Now, when we look at it from a physical sense, when we look at athletes, we always look at more performance, more performance, more performance, and we're always pushing that line to be able to motivate those athletes to more performance. But sometimes when we look at our students and with achievement, sometimes we say just achieving is good. We don't look at how we can make the performance better so they can better compete out in the world. And there's an important piece of that. We don't just take expectations plus pressure to make them achieve, because that's how you break the kids. That's how you break the people, because you're just putting pressure on them to achieve. And what we have to do is we have to build a culture of achievement that allows them to grow within that culture to achieve the things they need to achieve. So a lot of people want performance, but they also have to understand how you get performance is building a culture of performance that includes being able to say, you failed and you fell forward fast, to get those kids back on track, as opposed to you failed and you're worthless. Let me go work with somebody else. So I think it takes a growth mindset to be able to elevate those kids, but that growth mindset has got to be precipitated not by pressure, but by good culture.
Man, I really appreciate that. And yes, and I do support having a growth mindset and how we can get better. We have to believe that we can get better for us to get better. We should not just accept status quo and say that's it. We can if we want to, but we have to believe that we can. But I really appreciate how you get to that point in regards to creating a culture of achievement. Because once the culture is there, those who have doubts will start to believe, because you create the culture of achievement. So I believe that is important, and that we realize the importance of having a growth mindset, which leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's one of those things where the first thing I'll say to them is take action. You could sit around all day dreaming about how you're going to do something or what you're going to do in the future to be able to elevate people. And a lot of people get lost in that dreaming and thinking and scheming and trying to make the perfect plan. What I say to those folks is this: I say, stop worrying about making the perfect plan. Get out there in your community and look at what's going on. And even if you have an 80% plan and you get started, you're going to figure out that there's some things that were not right in that plan, but from being able to actually be out there and engaging with the world, you're going to figure out what you need to fix in that plan. And like I said, I'm a big guy on culture, as I said before. I don't ever want to try to be the Messiah. I don't want to go out there and say, hey, follow me, things are great while I'm here. I always talk more about building a culture because that I want things to endure after me because we have set good things in place. So when people are thinking about what they want to do, I say they need to first feed themselves. Once they feed themselves, they are strong enough to be able to feed the community. And I think the first thing is to take action to make sure that you're preparing yourself for the challenges that are out there. And once you are strong enough to handle the challenges that are out there, don't just sit on your laurels and say, hey, I've achieved something. Get off of those achievement and go out there and say, how can I help others to go along this way? And I think part of that is they have to explain to people that they are not special. You can do this too. I think too often we want to put people up on a pedestal and say that they're special so that we can have the release not to achieve like they have, saying, well, there's something special about that person. So I think people who are out there doing this need to say, I'm not special. I've done what I was able to do with work and building a culture, and you can do this as well, because that empowers people to say, oh, I can do it because that person's like me. But when a person is put up as like some kind of a paragon or some kind of unattainable role model, sometimes people are like, well, it's great. He was able to do that, but I can't do that because I'm not like him. Everybody can do this.
Well, and it goes back to what you shared first with a growth mindset, because a lot of people have this fixed mindset. This is all I can do. But you also is correct in regards to seeing what's need to be done and go out there and do it when it comes to creating positive change, but also for us to see what's possible through others and don't limit ourselves and thinking that it's only that person can do it. And that's something that we all have to become conscious of if we're going to see the change that we want to see. We can't rely on one person to do the work. As you said, you don't want to be this person that takes on all the work, because again, that person is going to burn out. That person's, can only do so much. So I think it's important that, as you mentioned, that we all see where we can do our part and learn from those who are doing the work, and don't think because they maybe have a advantage, they are the only one that can do the work. We have to take responsibility in creating the change we want to see. And also, as you mentioned, to make sure we're feeding ourselves, that we are strong enough. And we can feed ourselves by learning. We can feed ourselves by being in the right environment. We can feed ourselves by hanging around the right people, so we can learn, so we can actually develop, so we can go out there and make a difference. I really appreciate that perspective from us, seeing what is available to be done in our immediate community, but also make sure we're feeding ourselves so we can be our best self to make the impact that is needed. So I really appreciate that perspective. So that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today? And I know you kind of touched on it to some extent, but how can we help to change the narrative? And you can choose what narrative you want to allude to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to change the narrative of we can't do things, the narrative of all Black men being in the same basket, the narrative that's kind of been put out there by some of the nationalist talk in previous elections within the United States about, oh, well, they're poor, they're this and that. And also the whole thing of over focus on people talking about their haters. I'm trying to prove my haters wrong. I say I want to change that narrative to be the choir is singing your praises. You need to listen to the choir and achieve because of the choir and prove the choir, correct in their assessment that you are doing good things. That's your mentors, that's your family, that's your community, all the people there who think you can do well. They need to listen more to the choir and achieve for the choir versus the negative side of trying to prove their haters wrong. Haters are going to be haters. And you proving them wrong doesn't really do anything for you. But actually, your people who are singing your praises, your choir, they're singing your praises, proving your choir right is a positive way to be able to set things up so that you can do well and you can achieve. And then you're achieving with a community, your choir that's singing for you, versus trying to achieve for your haters who are going to just find something else to hate on you about. So I think that's part of that goes back to the mindset right there. Who are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? If you're doing this just to prove your haters wrong, that's kind of not satisfying and not nurturing, because you're proving people wrong who don't really care about you because they're your haters. But when you're proving people right, your choir who's singing for you, your mama, your dad, your church, your community, your mentors and things like that, those people are there when you do achieve to celebrate with you. So it's one of those things where no man is an island. And when you try to do things to prove your haters wrong, you put yourself on an island right there. There's going to be, cricket's going to be in a room when you prove to your haters, because your haters going to think about, well, you came in third, you didn't come in first, so you're terrible, you're horrible. They're going to think about the things that bring you down. You didn't win every football game. You lost one, so you're horrible. But when you look at it with your choir who's holding you up and supporting you, you're going to we understand, even though you lost, we saw the good things that you did right there, and we know what you can improve and how you can move forward. So it's about being an island versus working with your whole, not just your village, just like a metropolis at that point, working with your whole support system. So I try to look at the positive and look at the aspirational versus trying to look at proving people wrong as a factor in keeping your motivation high.
Well, I really love that perspective, because we often talk about proving the haters wrong. But when you switch it, and I'm really glad that you say that, because that is something that we need to talk more about. We're going to prove the people who believes in us right, because as you mentioned, they're the ones they're supporting us. So we have to, and we should. And as you mentioned, haters going to hate, and we can't focus on the haters because they have a job to do. And if we focus on them, we may end up maybe even somewhat come off track, because we're trying to do too much to appease them to some extent, and not so much of doing the things that we know we're supposed to do to advance the things that we want to advance, to create the change that we want to see, and to make the impact that we want to make. So I really appreciate that perspective when it comes to changing the narrative as Black men. As we go forward, Black men, let's not think about we're going to prove the haters wrong. Let's prove the people who are supporting us as we move forward right, because they're the one, as Dr. Fletcher said, will be there to celebrate us when we win, and when we make the progress, when we make the impact that we are here to make. So Dr. Fletcher, I know you have mentioned that you have been in the military, you have been in education, but I want to ask this question. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? I know you have done several things throughout your career or your life, but who have been that person that inspired or influenced you?
In my life, I've been influenced by so many people, and it would all depend on where you start with that right there. Going back to my mother and father and family, and the things they were able to do for me, grandmother, starting at that point. But I think through my life, I've had a lot of folks who have helped to build this tapestry. It kind of goes to what we talked about before in terms of the choir. I think I've had a good choir who's been putting me forward right there. But like I said, early on with my mother, funny story, kind of anecdote. We didn't have a lot. but my mother always believed in education. So imagine if you remember when you go to grocery store, they used to have like sets of encyclopedia that would be out there, and they would have like a different letter or a group of letters out there each week. And my mother would go to start to buy the encyclopedias, and she'd bring them home, and she'd buy them one grocery store trip a time. And then I think the first one got through like R, and then they discontinued it. And then like she did it another time, and she bought another set of those encyclopedias, a different company or something like that. And I think she got like through T. And what I always joke about is that I used to read those encyclopedias when they came in. It was like, we didn't have the internet back then. That was the window to education in the world. So what I used to joke about is that we never were able to finish a set of encyclopedias, but I'm a genius through T. So I think her influence with that stuff, always encouraging us to read and reading with us. She was always what was called a parent partner at school, where she would come to school and she would help out in the classroom for myself, my brother, and my sister, up through like third or fourth grade. And then when we're no longer at elementary school anymore, she would still be she became a teaching aide in the kindergarten and first grades. And I remember talking to her, and I said, Mom, because she was complaining one day, she said, I know more than some of these teachers, and I make about half the money. I said, and why don't you become a teacher then? And she said, well, I'm too old. I said, how could you be too old? And at the time she was maybe just getting into her 40s, and I had finished my undergraduate degree, and I was in the Air Force. So I challenged her. I said, you challenged me, now I'm going to challenge you. You told me I need to get an education. I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and you can do this too. So, okay, when you get fed back some of the stuff you've been giving out, she was honorable lady. So she went there and she worked for the next 6 years to be able to go part-time. And she got her bachelor's degree at what was University of District of Columbia. And when she finished that, she passed her teaching stuff, and she became a kindergarten through second grade teacher. And she did a lot of good work with that right there. It's not something she expected to do, but I knew it was something that she loved. And unfortunately, my mother passed away when she was 59, but she got a chance to achieve a dream and even get her master's degree and teach those kids between kindergarten and second grade for a few years. So I would say that would probably be one of the biggest people who influenced me to understand through the rest of my life, that from my early life to my later life, to understand that to achieve is putting your mind to it and understanding that you're not going to be aware of everything right away. But if you continue and you concentrate, you can lift burdens that you never thought you could lift. Like I tell people when they say, well, you got your PhD and you went to law school and you did all these kind of things, how do you do it? And I say, well, the beginning of every journey to me, it looks like I'm going ready to go up a 14,000 foot mountain. But then I look at the mountain, I don't look at the top, I look in front of me, and I go at a step at a time. And I think that my mother is probably the one who gave me that that motivation to understand, take it one step at a time and just keep going. And then when I challenged her on it, she was able to take her steps to be able to do that thing that was her mountain. So I appreciate it. I think that most people out there, if you have something in front of you, don't shy away because you think it's too big. Take it a step at a time, and then you'll find out you'll be at the summit sooner than you think.
I really appreciate the story about your mom and how she played a role. And my condolence to you and your
Thank you.
family. But that's a great story. It's very inspiring and motivating at the same time, because she went on and got her degrees later in life. And it goes back to what you shared in the beginning when it comes to us as people, as Black men, that having a growth mindset is really important, because when we have a growth mindset, it really helps us to realize that we can achieve whatever we put our minds to. It doesn't matter when we start. As you mentioned, every journey begins with a first step, and all we need to focus on is the first step, or that one step, and take one step at a time. Again, man, I really appreciate you sharing that story. And I know the listeners will appreciate the story as well, because there are people out there have dreams, have desires, and haven't taken the first step yet, thinking it's too late. It's not too late. You can start that journey to achieving the goal or goals you have for yourself. And that leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
I think that in many cases, Black men in society are undervalued, and I think it's a two way street in terms of looking at that. I think some of it is when we believe the hype that people put out there and we undervalue ourselves. When people tell us what we can't do and we actually believe that fool is telling us that we're not great, that's one side of it. So we got to make sure we get ourselves together and understand, again, about putting your mind to it and get it done. I think the other part about it is that there's some unfairness and kind of retrograde activity in terms of how diversity, equity, and inclusion is viewed in society, which I think people need to say, hey, wait a minute, we have to stand strong and let people understand it. If you rob people of their culture and their history, or an understanding of that culture and history, that robs them of the ability to be proud or have that culture and history as a foundation for the future. So it's kind of like you erase the good things and the bad things. You erase the struggles and the triumphs when you say, well, it really doesn't matter culturally if it just gets kind of peanut butter spread through everything else. So I think that in society today, there's too much of a movement to try to discount where people have come from and saying that, everybody is the same right now. Whereas we are a product of, whether it's in an individual family, we're a product of the genetics, we're a product of the social cultural things, we're a product of the environments, we're a product of many, many things. And no man has made himself yet. So we need to make sure that we don't lose the cultural history with all the good and all the bad, the things that happen. And it brings us to this point today. And once we are able to capture that, we have to understand how we take that as motivation to go forward into the future. A lot of people look back at the civil rights at its height in the 50s, going to the 60s, early 70s, and look at that as distant history. And some people look at it as the end of the road. Some people will look forward to President Obama becoming president as the pinnacle and the end all, we've made it kind of things right there, and we don't have anything else to do. And I think when you do that and you kind of sit back and say, okay, well, that game is over, you lose sight of the work to come. So we need to look at individuals who have given us great foundations like John Lewis. We have to be willing to get into good trouble to make sure that we don't fall into an abyss. We have to understand that if we don't continue to work for something every day, if we're not taking forward steps, we're probably not just standing still, we're probably taking backward steps and going retrograde. And we can't really be upset about the outcome if we aren't able to dedicate ourselves to participate in the process. I know a lot of people looked at Trump becoming president as, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. How did this happen? How it happened is you sat right there on the couch and looked at TV. And if you didn't go out and vote, you didn't motivate others to vote, then that's how it happened. And I'm not making a value judgment about that. I'm just saying that if you're upset about something and it happened and you didn't do anything in the process to make that not happen, you didn't go out and support candidates, you didn't go around to register people to vote. When money gets cut for the area you live in and you go like, oh, how did that happen? That sucks. They're always doing it to us. You don't have an internal locus of control at that point. You need to have control from inside. You need to be the one out there making sure that everybody takes the census so they know how many people are there, so that when the money is allocated for that next decade, the right amount of money goes to the area where you live because everybody's done a census. So a lot of people like to sit there on Monday morning as a quarterback and talk about how this is bad, how that is bad, and how this is bad. You can't do anything for the past, but you can say, how did it get this way and how can I change the future? Then you got to do that census, or you got to get out there and get the vote out there because when it's all over and you're stuck with that, you can be stuck with for a time. A president could be 4 to 8 years. A census is definitely 10 years. So I would say in the perception of Black men, we can't just be complainers on Monday morning. We got to be workers on Friday night.
Man, well said, well said, well said. And I was going to try and repeat some of what you have shared, but I'll let the listeners go back and listen to the knowledge and insights that you have shared, because I think it's important. But I will say that we have to realize that society may not put the best image or images of us out there. We have to make sure we value ourselves and don't accept the false narrative. I see ourselves as valueless. So we have to realize that we are valuable, despite society or despite the image that society
Hmm.
plays. But I will also say, as you mentioned, that we should not be complainers. We should be willing to do the work necessary to make the changes that we want to see happen. If we do nothing, we can't and should not be complaining about what we see. We must participate in the change that we want to see happen. And that cannot be stressed too much. But we have to take responsibility as we go forward. Yes, change may not just happen just because of what we do, but we must participate in the change that we want to see and do it intentionally and don't rest on one person reaching a certain status, as you have mentioned, because a lot of times, I think we think that because President Barack Obama being there, that's the pinnacle of our achievement, but there's so much more to be done, and we need to participate in that process. And that leads to this question, and I know you may have touched on it a little bit, but what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men?
Hey, what I want to see as a change in general is an attitude change, and it goes into two things right there. And I'm not down in Black man; I'm a Black man myself. What I'm saying is that being a military officer, being a professor, being on people's doctoral committees and things like that, I've learned some things. And one of the things that I learned is you can't want something more than you're willing to work for it. And many people want things really bad, but they don't want to work for it. They don't want to put the work in that's required to get it done. And that's a harsh reality. And people will say, why are you saying that kind of thing? I said, kids go like, hey, I want to be in the NFL. I said, how much work that takes? I'm not saying you can't do it, but are you willing to put in the work? I want to get a PhD. Do you understand? That's a great thing. Do you understand? Are you willing to do the work? So a lot of times people are big on their aspiration to do something, and then they are disappointed when they don't achieve it, but they don't do that self-evaluation, that level of self-evaluation that says, did I put in enough work to be able to achieve the thing I want to do? And if I didn't achieve the thing I wanted to do, is it too late for me to start doing it now? So a lot of people go like, well, I tried. I'm like, well, I was like, was it Star Wars Yoda? It's like, try not do. I say, well, I tried. I tried is the mantra of people who are falling down. But when you get back up from trying, you can do it if you are willing to work for what you want to achieve. But that's a ratio. I could probably put a graph together, say, your willingness to work for something is directly proportional to your ability to achieve it. And a lot of people don't get that right there. And here's something I want to say to people that when you do achieve, this is the other important part. When you do achieve, don't sit up there on top of your mountain going, I have achieved, singing to the sky and saying, I am so great. What you have to do, and this is what I'm doing right now for school district, I could be doing many different jobs. I could be making much, much more money if I wanted to, but that's not what it's all about. But one of the things that Black men need to do is when they do achieve, they have to get to the motion of paying it forward, whether that be doing something that directly impacts students, kids, the community, and stuff like that. You get too many people who got their stacks and stacks of cash who are set about going to see if they can buy more designer clothes, to see if they can buy more cars, more houses, have lavish vacations. And don't get me wrong, I like cars and houses and lavish vacations and things like that. But I'm going to make sure before I go off to do my things that are going to bring me joy, I'm going to make sure that I need to pay it forward to somebody else to make sure that I set up programs that are going to help kids. I mean, for example, in the school district, in the decade I've been with the school district, I've been able to write grants for over $7 million to make programs for kids in science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics. We've been able to buy a suite to go on a converted school bus that has augmented reality computers to help them learn everything from being able to do mechanics to be able to dissect a heart and things like that, learn medical things. There's many things that they can do in augmented reality that didn't exist in the district before. The foundation of a dual immersion Spanish language program in elementary school was paid for by that. Also, a math program called DNA Math that allows math teachers to become better teachers by taking the fear out of them so they can take the fear out of the students so math achievement can happen. So it's one of those things where what can I do? I could buy myself 2 Bentleys, but I could also roll my sleeves up and get great programs for students to be able to achieve. Because that when I buy 2 Bentleys, I have 2 Bentleys, but when I influence the district that has 28,000 students, I'm exponentially impacting the future and paying it forward, because those 28,000 students will have some level of families after them. You know, if it's 28,000 and so on and so on, you go about 30 years, you probably impacted a few 100,000 people from making sure that students have the things they need to be able to go forward and achieve and see the world. So yes, I'll say you can't want something more than you're willing to work for it. And once you get that dynamic right and you're able to work for it and achieve it, you got to make sure that one of your dynamics is paying it forward. Because if you just do it for yourself, you might have some material things, but if you do it for the community and you put it back into the community, you're going to have a better future that transcends beyond even your lifetime.
No, that's the consciousness that we need to develop to move forward, or even to move the needle forward. Once we develop that consciousness, we'll see more change than any leader in itself will be able to do, because now we are part of the change.
Mhm.
And the consciousness, and I'll just sum up those two areas that you really touch on, are the areas of us doing the work that is necessary to achieve what we want. It's not just wanting something,
Right.
but be willing to do the work to achieve it. And when we get there, we pay it forward. We look back and see how many people we can help to get there, to get out of their situation, to make progress. And because the more of us, I believe, this is one thing I believe wholeheartedly, once we achieve at a certain level, it makes it easier for others to achieve. And so the more of us achieve success and show in our willingness to open doors, to pay it forward, it makes it easier for others to believe. As they said, it's easier to become what you see. So when we are
Right.
showing them through our actions, not just saying we want these things to happen, but we are actually doing it, it will inspire those who may have doubts that, oh, yeah, it is possible. Because we're not only saying we want those changes, but we are demonstrating what it takes to create that change. Those two perspectives are really important as Black men, especially as we go forward on our journey. But my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
I said, again, like influences, I have had so many pivotal moments in my life. And some people say, oh, I got to live a lot in my lifetime already. Pivotal moments in my lifetime. One is making the realization that growing up in, like I said, I didn't know we were poor when I was growing up in Anacostia, because everybody was poor. So it was relative. In fact, I felt like it was upper poor because we had a semi-detached house in the neighborhood, as opposed to living in apartments and stuff like that. But when, you get out into the rest of the world, so yeah, we probably were poor. But also seeing all the crime and violence that was around me as I was growing up, the pivotal moment was understanding I didn't want to be the continuation of that. And one of the things that influenced me back then, it was kind of that I can say definitely, I talk about it to this day, is that I remember one of the television stations in Washington, D.C., it might have been WJLA, which was the ABC station. If it wasn't them and they hear this, they can correct me. But it was called The Shame of the City. The Shame of the City was a little special that they had on about Anacostia, where I grew up. And it had all these statistics in it about a young Black man who came from where I came from, has so small a percentage of not going to jail or dying before 21 years old. It was basically a show that basically said it, I should just give up. I mean, like, hell, if I don't, either I'm gonna be in prison or I'm gonna be dead by 21. So I might as well just do whatever, because I don't have any longevity planned in with it. But I think watching that program at a young age made me, just put him, you get stubborn when you're a kid, you be defiant. I'm like, that's not going to define me. So I said, I'm going to be something different. How do I do something to be different than this? And that's when I started thinking about the military. And at first I thought about enlisting. In fact, I enlisted in the Marine Corps, but when I was in high school, but my Army ROTC, Army Junior ROTC instructor, the lead one, Colonel Gregory said, "You just took the ASVAB and you got it off the charts." Me and my buddy Mark Jackson said, "You guys are not going to the military." So we already went over to Sergeant Kruger, I believe his name was, and we said we're going to sign up on a buddy system to go to the Marine Corps. He said, "No, that's not happening." I said, "Well, we already signed." He said, "Well, let's give me this afternoon." So yeah, evidently he went over and said something to Sergeant Kruger, and I got the paperwork, and he came back to school with us, said, "You guys aren't going to the Marine Corps." And I said, "Okay." Sergeant Kruger okay with that? Yeah, he was a colonel. He said Sergeant Kruger was just fine with that. And then the next day he took us up to the counselor suite, and he said, "Give them fee waivers. They don't take the SAT." So we took the SAT off of the fee waivers. I had no idea or heritage to want to take the SAT because I didn't know what it was. But I did well on it. Mark did well on it. Mark went to Cornell. I went off to the Air Force Academy Prep School before I came back to the University of Maryland to finish my undergrad. And that was a pivotal point when I'm thinking I want to do one thing. I got an idea about the military. And then, Colonel Gregory is basically telling us we're going to be officers. Mark was the Corps commander, and I was the number two, the vice commander. And he made sure both of us went to college. Now, he didn't pay for college or anything like that. But once we got on that path, you got a hunger for like, okay, I can do this. My mom, like I said, my mom didn't go to college until after I was already got my master's degree. My dad was a carpenter and everything like that. Good man, strong man. He supported our family and stuff like that, but he didn't have a heritage of college. If it wasn't for Colonel Gregory, who said, "Hey, you're going to college. You got to go take that SAT," I never would have done it. I would have been a Marine.
Man, and having those people in our lives, especially early, can be as this question is about pivotal moment, and that's really a pivotal moment because you had one intention to do something, but he saw something else in you and realized that you have more potential, maybe more than what you were thinking about when it comes to yourself, and just guide you on the right path or a path that position you for greater opportunity. And as men, we sometimes have to do this. When we see the potential in especially the younger generation, guide them in the right way, help them to see what they don't see, because they may not realize they have potential to do great things. So we have to be that for them at times. And it doesn't have to be our direct kids, as Dr. Fletcher, it was his colonel, his teacher, his JROTC lead saw something. So we have to take on those responsibility at times and guide the next generation to see themselves beyond what they do sometimes see. So man, thanks for sharing again that story because I think it's important that we play a role in shaping the lives of the next generation. And that takes me to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I think one of the things that I learned later in life is that you're never really done learning. I think many people go, oh my goodness, I'm glad to get this high school diploma. Oh my goodness, I'm glad to get this undergrad diploma. Oh my goodness, I'm glad to get this. Obviously, I'm not going back to school kind of thing. And I think I was sitting there during the pandemic, and we were working remotely from home and stuff like that. And I said, if this thing is ever over, what am I to do? So I looked at some rules for like law school, and they were doing some things remotely since it was the pandemic. And I said, I'm going to do this. And I was over 50 years old already. This was one of those things where it's like, it was a song, album from a long time ago. It was called Duty Now for the Future. And I was like, I always thought about that saying right there. And I said, what am I doing now for the future? And I said, a lot of people look at me like, you already got a PhD, you already got a master's degree, you already got this and that, and you already got this and that. And I'm going, well, that was for the challenges that I've already taken on, let me go ahead and look at this, because if I can push myself to be able to do this and understand what's going on, coming out on the other side, there's got to be good things. So I started doing that. I got my Master of Laws in dispute resolution coming out in 2022 in August, and taking classes on criminal law. I'm taking classes on all these different law topics, but also getting a good feel for negotiation, mediation, and arbitration, and that kind of thing. And then lo and behold, when I come out on the other side, there's a lot of politics and a lot of legal stuff that's out there. with the school district, and I was able to be functional in that because I said that there's nothing in my life that I've learned that hasn't been useful. I just had not known it was going to be useful while I was learning it. So a lot of people go dismiss, again, the dismiss thing, where they're like, well, I don't need to learn that. What I need algebra for, what I need this for. So you're never going to know what you need it for if you don't learn it. Because if you don't have it when you need it, it's going to be transparent to you. You're like, oh, well, I didn't have something. You can't quantify that. But when you have something that you've learned and it comes up, you can have that aha moment going, oh, this is why I paid attention about Title IX. This is why I paid attention about Title VII. This is why I paid attention about the criminal law. This is why I paid attention about civil liabilities versus criminal liabilities and stuff like that, and why it makes sense. And one of the things that's been kind of amazing is that I read contracts differently. I understand what they are and how they look and how they're structured, and I know what to look for in a contract. And I'm not going to go out there and be a litigator. I'm excited. My birthday was early this month. I'm 56 years old. I'm not going to go out there and be a litigator. I don't have any desire to be Perry Mason. I guess that probably dates me right there, because that's like, some of the young folks probably don't know who that is, but that was a TV lawyer. But I do know that it helps me to be able to help myself, but also helps me help people around me when they say, hey, can you take a look at this? And like I said, I don't play lawyer. I go out there and then I get the lawyer who works for the school district to say, but now I can have intelligent conversations with him and understand what he's talking about. So it makes me effective in that way. So a lot of people would say, hey, you got this and you got that, and why would you need to go back to school? Why is that important? What are you doing that for? I'm like, because I know that whenever I arm myself with knowledge, there always comes a time when it's needed. And if you are a person who doesn't have the skills to do something, you're going to feel like you're getting defeated by, like, man, if I only knew more about this, if I only knew more about this. It's like the old thing that says, when they went to the chief of the tribe and says, when is a good time to plant a tree? And the chief, he says to them, 20 years ago. And I said, we're standing in front of you right now. How can we put it in the ground 20 years ago? He says, well, then plant a tree today. So don't wait for the times when you really need something. Just kind of think about your life in the areas you're going into and start learning it. It doesn't have to be going to law school. It can be reading books. If you can do a Coursera online, it could be going to learn a certification. But do those things when you have the time. Don't get the time when you need it and wish you had it.
Man, that is great. That is really great to be aware of. Don't wait until we need something to start working on it, and start working on it so when the opportunity presents itself, we'll be ready. And not only that, so just listening to you and sharing that experience, I think when we learn something, right, I think it opens our mind, our perspective. So when we're going through life, because we have a different perspective, a broader horizon, we are more apt to see the opportunities that available to us. But before we expose ourselves to information or things that will help us to be better, we may not see the opportunities that are there for us. So I really appreciate that perspective. And
I have a test for that too. It's like it's an easy phenomenon.
What's that?
If I have a test for that too. It's like, you ever learn a new word, and a word you never heard before, and then after you learn that new word, you hear it all the time?
Yes.
That word was being used all the time. You just didn't perceive it because you didn't know what it meant. That's the same thing with learning and education. There's so much in this world that goes on that it's background noise that you don't understand. But once you start to understand it, you actually can hear it, just like learning a new word that you never had before.
Man, that is so true. That is so true. That is so true. Because sometimes when I'm listening to audiobooks, once I come across something, it's like everybody's saying the same thing. So that is so true. Man, but thanks for sharing that. And thanks for reminding us how important it is to learn before we need to know what we're learning for. Because by learning, we open ourselves for more opportunities. So before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support the work that you're doing to make a difference? Because, man, you're doing a lot for especially the next generation. So where can they find you to support you, with the work that you're doing?
Like I said, I'll quote Coach Prime on that one right there. I'm not hard to find.
That's right. That's right.
I'm not hard to find, but like I said, I do work with my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I do work with Sigma Pi Phi, the Boule. But if they want to find some things that I care about and they want to support it, just look online for Colorado Springs and look for, one is the African American Youth Leadership Conference. It's an annual event that's put on by, that was originated by my fraternity locally, the local chapter, where they bring in primarily minority kids, but all kids to come in to learn about college opportunities, to learn about different things in the community, learn about restorative practices and things like that. They do that one weekend a year as the event itself. A few thousand kids come in to learn about everything from reading, math, how to get into college, how to do their federal aid application for aid and that stuff like that, your FAFSA and that kind of thing, up to like they have a one section for the young men who come in where they do Project Alpha to teach them about the community and things like that, and also sex education, that kind of like that, with their parents' permission. That's one of the things that you can find and look at their AAYLC, African American Youth Leadership Conference, and contribute. Another one is Educating Children of Color. It's another similar convention where bringing kids in, getting them scholarships and things like that. Those are things that are in my community and close to my heart, because if you're doing things at the community level, you're building up from your community to community that you're in. And with my fraternity and the Boule, I get to do things at the national level, contribute to those things that might get into political action and being able to support candidates and the census and voting and things like that. So, like I said, I'm not hard to find. I'm always moving and working. And if you want to put a point on it to help some organizations out I care about, African American Youth Leadership Conference and the Educating Children of Color.
Man, thanks for sharing that. I will also put in the description ways to contact you. So just in case they want to reach out to you, I will make sure I have that in the description. But my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
Yeah, my impact on the world is, like I said before, about influence in the future, about whether I'm community organizing and helping out adults and helping them to understand the things they need to do, or whether I'm doing things to be able to directly contribute to children. My impact is to give people an understanding that they can relieve themselves from their despair by not putting themselves into situations where despair is going to get on them. And I'm not saying there's no such thing as mental health crises and things like that, because there are. And when those things happen, you need to go get help and get counseling. But what I'm saying is that the road to be able to get out of those self-made situations, that morass or that quicksand, is to start to build. So the impact I want to have is, like, I have a friend from law school, and she had a great idea. I'm not going to say what it is because she hasn't put it in place yet. But she gives me a call, and we have Zoom things where I talk to her about the business she wants to be in, and I give her advice about making sure the contracts are good. I gave her some examples of contracts, some ideas on negotiating with the person who's going to be a business partner to make sure that she's set up right. And that's one person. I would do that with any of my friends who talk to me right there. But I also tell them this. I say, I grew up in DC, and people always talking about the hookup, like, hey, can you help me out? Can you help me out? I said, but I said to her, I said, T, well, one day if you start making money from this, you start asking me questions, you're going to have to give me a contract so that I can help you out with the stuff right there. Because one of the things we too often do in the Black community is that we want to get something free from the person who's working, but we have to understand we have to give that person who's working to help us some financial benefit if you're getting some financial benefit. That way it goes out there and it's also able to be paid forward. So I always put that out there with people right there. Say free advice is only free for so long. You start making money and doing stuff like that, it's going to become make me a consultant. So take care of me as I take care of you, kind of thing. And that's not a selfish thing, and that's not a capitalist thing. It's just a matter of, if we expect when your buddy opens up a store or a restaurant, if you expect to go to your buddy's restaurant and eat free all the time, eventually your buddy's going to go out of business because he's feeding you free food and you haven't given any money for the restaurant. So when your buddy is making that restaurant, you want to go on to be the first one, and then you want to bring people there. You want to spend money there. You want to make sure this is very successful. And then when it's very successful, he wants to give you a comp every so often. It's fine. But when they're just starting out, say, no, I want to pay market price. I want to pay this right here because I want to make sure that when I come back in 5 years, this good food is still here. So we want to make sure that we understand that we got to, supporting each other is not just asking for that hookup. Supporting each other is making sure that instead of asking for the hookup, it's asking, how can I help and how can I bring more people to you? So we'll take care of each other down the line right there. But I want my impact for people to be people to understand that you got to feed those who feed you. And you got to make sure that things, if you do that, you create sustainability, and those things that you like and those things that they've built and you built will be there for a long time. If you don't feed each other, it's no sustainability. And when you look back, it's going to be a great idea that happened 5 years ago, but it went out of business after 3 years.
That is true. And we can't stress that enough. That yes, we need to support each other. And yes, we also need to compensate each other, especially if you're benefiting from it. Don't just take the information or the resources and don't compensate the person that is helping. So that's a great reminder. But I hear the impact that you want to make within the community and just to make a difference. And I believe you are doing so. Just your background and the work that you are committed to doing shows your commitment to making a difference. So Dr. Fletcher, it's a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact. I know the listeners have received a whole lot from what you shared. I have benefited from just listening to you and your conversation and the knowledge that you share. So, man, I want to say thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact.
My pleasure. I was happy to hear about the opportunity, and when we shared some questions and some emails back and forth, I knew I wanted to speak about it. I said, I'm like WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. So when you ask me a question, that's the answer you get. I'm not rehearsed on it. This is the stuff I talk about all the time. This is what I talk to my kids about. This is what I talk to my community about. So it's a pleasure to be here and talk to all of your listeners about the same things so that they may be successful in their endeavors in the future.
Man, I really appreciate it. And listeners, as always, our job and responsibility is to bring to you guests we believe you will be able to learn from, guests who will inspire you and motivate you and encourage you to press forward. And as Black men, we need that type of support. We need the encouragement as we move forward to make a positive difference in our communities. And with Black Male Impact, we are committed to inspire you and to help you to move the needle forward. That's our commitment as we work together to make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. Thanks again for being with us here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you.